This week on Around the Coin, Brian, Faisal, and I discuss Clinkle. We talk about their recent launch. After the company raised $25 million close to a year ago, they finally launched, being called a laughingstock from the headline of the TechCrunch article to having an internal disruption of their investors, their engineering team. Really a tough company to watch from the outside, as it appears they've seemed to crumble with the limelight, but you never know. We give them the benefit of the doubt, admire what they're doing, and look forward to the future products. We move into PayPal, the Bitcoin partnership there, and Faisal digs into some of the international ramifications of the Bitcoin and PayPal partnership and some of the things that eBay, PayPal could do that may make them very successful in the future, as well as the recent and big news of Facebook and Stripe partnering, really sealing the deal that Facebook is going to make a serious splash in the online payment space. And of course, wrapping up at the end, we dig into a bit of the Apple Pay philosophy and some of the reasons why Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover might have something to look out for, and it might be the kiss of death integrating with Apple Pay. So hope you enjoy. All right, guys, how are you both doing today? Today's exciting. We're going to split up the conversation, talk a bit about Clinkle, talk about PayPal and the Bitcoin partnership. We'll touch on Facebook partnering with Stripe, which is really interesting. And then, as always, we'll spice it in with a little Apple Pay at the end where we can. With that said, I look forward to it. Brian, would you want to?
Clinkle. Well, Clinkle suffered what I think any company would probably want to avoid. Let's put it in very simple terms, hype. And if you study hype in the music industry, in the movie industry, it never turns out. Now, some things can be promoted very well, but if there is a maniacal desire to get people interested in something way before something is delivered, expectations perhaps could never mathematically and psychologically be reached. So, we can go back in technology. Segway was one of these big hyped technologies. We're all going to be like a Roman emperor balancing on these segways in the future. It didn't happen for a lot of reasons. Google Glass is another hype scenario. And in payments, it started with Pay by Touch, and that fell miserably into a huge mess. Pay by Touch was a company that had a lot of glamour investors, federal judges, people that were part of the Bill Clinton administration, governors, all kinds of famous people in that company, and it failed miserably. And recently Square, and now Clinkle. Now, why payment companies? Well, I think what happens is payment companies seem very seductive. It seduced me 30 years ago. I'm still in it. But from its simplistic view, it looks like it's something where you can just kind of wedge yourself in there and disrupt everybody, and you could make a whole ton of money. So when Clinkle first started, we have a gentleman, Lucas, and he was probably 19, 20 years old when he first stumbled upon the idea of making some kind of reward and payment system for university campuses and colleges. And the premise seemed kind of interesting, but the market demographic is something that always I questioned. I said, well, we have individuals who are primarily deriving income from their parents. The way that is already pretty well defined. If dad or mom has a Chase bank account, the kid probably has a Chase debit card, and they load the money, and it's rather simple. There's not much you can get in the middle of that. Even PayPal, Venmo, and all these other Square Cash doesn't make any sense because mom and dad are not going to jump out of their online checking account just to send money. It's already there. So that seemed to be a little bit of an early warning shot for me. But they were talking about technology, which was interesting. Very early on, Sonics was something that they wanted to use. Now, use of Sonics for transferring data and information is not new.
This is the high frequency,
high frequency
noises, right?
Yeah. So Sonics has its history all the way down to the regular modem FSK frequencies. It's not a new thing. They just moved it outside the normal range of 20,000 kilohertz of the human hearing.
Which admittedly, that's quite clever, right?
It is very clever, but it's been around for quite a long time. Even I'm sure Faisal had seen this different parts of the world. It's been used in Africa, et cetera. And I've known of a few startups that were working on this for quite a long time to try to be the lowest common denominator of technology. I must say, Apple was researching using Sonics before NFC. And I'm not even ruling out that Sonics is not a part of an Apple future. There are some patents that are interesting, much different than these patents, by the way. So there's a company called Swoosh that invented a number of uniquenesses within a Sonics applications, and that ultimately got acquired by a company called Verifone, the largest payment card terminal company in the country. What really interested me about Clinkle in the early days is they negotiated wisely with existing players in the industry. This is people to learn, you can't disrupt payments. You need to find ways to work with infrastructure. And Verifone at the time saw the amount of exposure that Clinkle was getting and said, yes, let's work together. So hidden within the MX series of customer-facing devices is a hidden feature that very few people know exists, and even Verifone doesn't talk about it, is the Sonics capability of these terminals. So you have NFC, you have EMV, you have magstripe card, and you have BLE, and you have Sonics, which is a Swoosh patent. And so Clinkle actually also applied for some very limited patents. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if they're ever going to be granted because there is some prior art. Lucas, the CEO, was named in one of the patents. And so there were some early negotiations, and I had seen some early tests of this device, and it was quite interesting because it had the ability to go viral very quickly if they moved very fast, and they didn't just focus on college students. They focused on other segments that actually had real use cases. And one could go back to basically almost every one of our shows when we talked about payments and ways that wallets and things could work, and you can derive where some of those use cases could be. Or they can just sit down and talk to the three of us, and we'd probably give them 20. Anyway, that is where I was really kind of motivated with Clinkle. I said, this is great. And then there was a layer on top of that that would have been loyalty. So the first layer was payments. Second layer was sort of person-to-person perks, maybe let's call it gifting or tipping. And another layer was something that we would normally attribute to loyalty. And it was going to be derived from the handsets of any type of cell phone. And the merchant, unfortunately, would require an upgrade if they didn't have the new Verifone terminals. But the convergent Verifone, which is the largest terminal manufacturer in the world at this point, was successful in upgrading all these new terminals for EMV requirements. It would automatically magically appear, just like what's going on with Apple Pay right now. Apple chose
do you believe that could it have been smoke and mirrors? Could it have been a decoy all along?
No.
Or do you think they actually built it and then realized that we can't push this in the market, we need to pull back? Is that why they were so late to market?
You come from a background of sales with them. So what happened was, and this is what, again, I feel like I just repeat myself, selling. They did not respect hiring salespeople. So they assumed that they could use social forces and social embarrassment to merchants, especially in college towns. Oh, you don't have Clinkle? Oh, then I'm not going to visit your business. That's the wrong way about it. What you do is you say, Mr. Merchant, we're inventing a new system. Here's the benefits for you. A real salesperson selling it and working on it. They refused to hire salespeople. So they just said, we'll just have students. Socially arm twist. It didn't work. And then the clock started ticking. The very famous investors that were involved started saying, what's going on? And then let's look at Lucas, right? Every one of the people listening to this show right now, what were you doing when you were 19 or 20 years old? And what if somebody laid upon you, none of us know that we're brilliant. I've come across some of the most brilliant individuals that the world has ever judged, and it's some of the most talented individuals. And when you really get down to the humanity, they don't even know where it comes from. They don't even know that they are these things. And if they seem egotistical, it's probably just a shell that they create to try to deal with the fame. So you're this famous person all of a sudden overnight. You're showered with money. You have people telling you you're going to do great and brilliant things. And all of a sudden you start looking at, holy cow, I can't manage this. And so what happens is your teams within your company start leaving you. There's turmoil. We can see the same thing taking place at Square. I mean, Jack is a brilliant guy. He's been around companies a while, but still, how do you manage all these people? How do you manage their expectations? And try doing that when you're not even 25. And, certainly Mark Zuckerberg did great things, but look what Mark did. He surrounded himself with incredibly brilliant individuals. And not just, a lot of people think, well, he had great technologists. Guys like Brett Taylor and Adam D'Angelo and a guy that helped start Quora. These guys were not just great programmers, they were great thinkers. And they grounded guys like Mark Zuckerberg. And Mark also, if you watch Social Network, he surrounded himself with a litany of individuals who were quite colorful, and they were very important for his development. Lucas didn't have that. So, this is not, let's feel sorry for Lucas. It's just, let's get a reality adjustment. If you want to look at what happened was he lost his technical team. His technical team just basically gave up on his vision. And when they left, the entire Swoosh patent relationship, the entire Sonics patent relationship dematerialized. Verifone lost interest because right around that time, Apple approached him and said, listen, we're vigorously getting involved in NFC and we want you to be a part of it. It was brilliant on Apple's part. And they did this with everybody in the industry. Said, we want you to be a part of this. Instead of saying, hi, we're here to disrupt you, they're saying, we're going to build something new. And then obviously what happened at Clinkle, they got word that Apple was doing something. They didn't quite, like most of the Silicon Valley, they couldn't believe it was going to be NFC. They couldn't believe it was going to be as big as Apple made it to be. They just thought something was up. So they figured, okay, we need to pivot quickly.
But under what context is the pivot, right? Because I can't quite foresee Clinkle pivoting internally over rumors that Apple is going to do payments, because there's really nowhere to pivot, right? If you're going to play in the arena, you might as well double down on whatever you're thinking, right? Like if Apple does their thing, then so be it. There's not much you can do about it, and frankly, it may or may not affect you. But you can't predict that, right? You're not going to do intelligence and figure out what Apple does.
No, you could. You could, because all you need is to study gravity and history. It's very simple. If Apple is successful, you can use that as your ultimate milestone. If Apple's successful, you're screwed. If Apple's mildly successful, you're screwed. And then you start looking at the topography Apple's laying out and say, how can I live within this new Apple ecosystem? So I look at Apple going to NFC like Apple choosing to use USB. It's an open standard. The fact that Apple went to NFC is
Brian,
open
do you think
standard.
that this severely hurts companies like Level Up or
Yes.
Quapay? We had Joaquin on the show. Shopkick. Are these companies
Shopkick
that
was just acquired 3 hours ago? They're just acquired by a Korean company. So you already see what's happening. Shopkick shouldn't have been acquired. I mean, they had a brilliant number of a brilliant marketing team, great salespeople. They should have really have extended around the new Apple ecosystem. Instead, I think they freaked out.
So is every other company admitting that this, to me, I just have they are Apple, right? But Google has also tried this, and you don't see every other company immediately folding their cards once Google jumped in space.
Here's the difference, and this is what makes Apple always so much more brilliant than a lot of other companies. It's why iTunes exists. It's why movies are on your device, and it's why you can buy an Apple phone from any cellular provider without any junk. I mean, when you go and buy an Android device, I'm sure you have to spend most of your time unloading the junk that the carrier puts on the phone. Apple said, no, we are hermetically sealing our device. You don't get to put anything on this phone. But we're going to give you the ability to make more profits than you ever could realize. Apple has made AT&T, Verizon, and all the other companies around the world more money than all of the other cellular providers.
Yeah, I mean, I get that Apple has all the leverage to potentially make this very successful. I just think, knowing a founder's mentality, no one is going to fold their cards when another company makes a power move. Even if it's Apple, I just know that, Joaquim is not going to say, oh, that's it. Apple got in the space. Time for us to.
And I think that's laudable. But, here's what I say. If I can tell you that there's a wall down the dead end street that you're going down 100 miles an hour, and you're young and you're brilliant, you could perhaps dematerialize and appear on the other side of the wall. You could jump the wall, you can go under the wall, but realistically, you're going to have to deal with that wall. And I've never seen anybody dance against Apple and win, ever. Nobody's ever won against Apple and in their own game. Now, some might argue that Android and Google are beating Apple. That's not the game Apple's playing, right? They're playing a completely different game. Yeah. And so that's what I'm not saying the game over for people. I'm just saying that if you understand what the mountain is going to look like ahead, shouldn't you deal with the topography rather than assuming there's no mountain? I mean, I would say
true, but even of Apple's size, they make I remember looking at an icon set of all the Apple products that you can't get off your phone, and I don't use any of them. None of them, and I think you can't just assume they're just guys that, Brian, but remember, they're humans in a room. They're just guys in a room making decisions. All right, so Brian, let me ask about the Clinkle product. What do you think of it now? So
let me see where it is now. So what happened is we have an amazing amount of hype built around this company, and what it does is it sucks the oxygen from the room. And I want you to sort of go down this as a founder and somebody trying to get funding in a sec, but it sucks the oxygen out of the room for every other payment startup idea. It sucks the oxygen out of the room for funding, the narrative. Companies like Square, who were actually doing some things during that period that were quite laudable and quite advanced, were having to deal with the narrative that Clinkle's going to come out with something new. So it's very hard strategically when you have, quote unquote, a stealth company that's being overly hyped. But there's a downside to it. The more likely your expectations of the consumer marketplace are never going to be met. And one may argue that mom and dad didn't hear about Clinkle. They certainly heard about Square and Square Wallet, and that obviously created a tremendous problem for the company from a PR level, because it actually was a product that was out there, and they were on Good Morning America, with Jack telling everybody that we got a new way to pay. Clinkle, unfortunately, hyped in the echo chamber of the startup community, and it made enemies pretty quickly because people who had some incredible ideas were not able to get any attention. They weren't able to get any funding, and legitimate companies like Square, who were trying to do innovation, and even PayPal, were being sidestepped. Meanwhile, what was going on in the company was a tremendous amount of turmoil. Again, we have a lack of true leadership, and you have incredibly brilliant, incredibly wealthy venture capitalists and well-notable individuals like Richard Branson support. It's very much like I've seen in the music industry.
Brian, what about the product itself?
So now what we are left with is, I feel that we are now looking at a burnt out vestige of the dream that Clinkle had. And so what we're left with is, I'll tell you the product. It's a gift card, or reloadable gift card. It's not a debit. A lot of people call it a prepaid debit card. A prepaid debit card is a completely different vehicle. It's charged differently under interchange. This is a reloadable gift card. They made it look nice and slick. It's a black face with just the Visa logo and the numbers, and you get to load money on it. Okay, that's nice. Nothing new. And you get to pay to load money on it. Whoa, hold on. It says on their front page that we don't like fees. Hidden in the fine print, you have to pay money to reload on that card. Problem number one. Problem number two, there's a whole litany of fees. Account balance checks, you're paying 50 cents. Foreign ATM fees, you're paying $3 if you want to go and use it.
ATM,
so you go, if you want to get the money out. So you put the money in, and then you got to pay money. You pay money to put it in.
So what's a use case? Give us their most common use case.
All right. So here's what they're hoping. They're hoping, quote unquote, this is their own people, that the ramen noodle students at these universities.
Oh, ramen noodle, yeah.
Yeah. You're right, and which I have a problem with anybody
I
in a
remember those
professional
days.
setting. But I have a problem with anybody in a professional setting just using those terminologies because, first off, they're racist in some ways. Second
Okay.
off, there's a whole
So
lot of.
give me the example. What's the use
So
case?
they're hoping that mom and dad load this card up, right? And you got to remember, mom and dad got to go through a whole lot of hoops to get to Clinkle's load system, right? It's not
Sure.
in there already.
We'll make that assumption, right?
Okay, so mom and dad load the card up, and then this is the killer app within Clinkle. Then once you have money on the card, you go to 7 merchants, and you get treats. Okay, so now we have something called a treat as a reward bonus. Okay, so what is a treat? Nobody knows. It's not clearly defined. What is the value of a treat? Nobody knows.
So the specific use case, Brian, is Joey's at college. He wants to get money from his parents. His parents download Clinkle. They upload their credit card or their bank account information. They send him money through the app, and now
they have to pay to send him money.
To send him money, and then now he can spend it.
Yeah, at 7 merchants. All right. So, and you can do person to person too. So, mom and dad can send you money, and then you can go and give your friends a beer run money. So, all right. So it's person to person and apparently very quick. All right. I have a problem.
So it sounds like a lot of the same functionality that Venmo would fulfill
Absolutely.
right now. Right?
But they, hold on. We missed the really great part about it. All right. Now you have these treats after you've visited 7 merchants. All right. First, they've done no research about college student buying patterns. 7 transactions may, in fact, be 2 months worth of use cases, right? Because a lot of times what happens is that money is turned into cash very quickly because they're buying very small, $2 at McDonald's, 99 cents for ramen noodles, right? And it's not really staying in an electronic medium. Now, one may argue, okay, they can do that. So anyway. 7 transactions later, you've accumulated enough points. You can go and send the treat to a friend. Now, that friend doesn't necessarily have to be on Clinkle. Oh my God, what do we have? A viral mechanism built in. Multi-level is really kind of what it is. So now for your friend to retrieve that treat, they have to go and spend at one merchant location. And here's the killer fee of you. And if their luck is right and, Vegas odds are there, they might be able to get that last transaction gifted by Clinkle.
Okay, so it sounds like there is a lot of work to be done on their side. Let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk about the PayPal Bitcoin partnership.
Well, no, I got to pull you in here for 1 second.
Sure.
What did Clinkle do in your mindset as a founder to the mentality of funding? I know you wrote a piece on Quora about this, and I think it's very important to get an element of this because I've had hundreds of founders over the years complain to me about what was going on with the mindset. What do they do to rob the oxygen in the narrative?
Sure. Yeah. So I think coming from a founder's perspective, there's a bit of a founders club mentality almost, and I say that not with any elitist perspective, but from the perspective of recognizing the difficulty it is to not only build a team and build an early product and get traction, but just the raising money aspect. Just raising money alone there's no founder I've met that enjoys raising money because you don't get the gratification of progressing your business. It's truly a timeout. Let's go do this thing, right? Raise money, we'll come back with the fruits of the labor and then we'll continue on with our workload. And oftentimes that is such a draining process that you're often at 50% attention rate throughout the 2-3 months that you're fundraising. A lot of times you could do it in shorter, 2-week increments, but it's still a lot of attention. It's a lot of time. So when you come out of that, you have these sort of battle scars, especially on Angel Round, on Series, pre-Series A, because that first financing round where you're making introductions, you are hitting the streets, you don't have a lot that the next guy doesn't, right? So you're selling the vision, you're selling your team. It's a very emotional time. And it's very difficult, even to get to 500K, even to get to $1 million in funding with the little traction that you have. I remember at FlowTab, we had, I think, 11 bars using our mobile payment system. And we had, a couple $1,000s in transactions repeatedly. And we tried to play this. You turn the piece of sand into a beach. And it's difficult. You meet all these people and you get 95% no's. and you eventually get there, and you realize how difficult it was for other founders who got to that same level. But Clinkle doesn't have that same respect. I don't look at them and say, oh, well, they fought really hard to get a product. They, got early traction. They went out and they worked really hard to meet all these people. They raised 25 million in first financing. You can call it whatever you want, but they did that with no traction, no product in the market, and that creates a bit of envious.
Well,
right?
they must have had an awesome information memorandum. That they
their pitch deck, I'm sure, was 10 slides and had some. But
if someone is putting $25 million, I mean, there had to be an amazing case. An amazing case that someone said, you know what, I'm going to plunk my money down.
Well, here's the other thing, Faisal, you have to realize is, it snowballs, right? So you have a couple big investors, especially AngelList now is this sort of new catalyst for speed. It just puts on, even with Home Hero, we've gotten, upwards of 70, investor requests. And it really opens the floodgates to being able to raise a lot of money very quickly from a lot of people. And I don't necessarily know that they went through AngelList, but people get in groupthink, right? If you have a few big investors, you'll get 25 smaller ones chasing them. So I could see how they got to where they did. But I think it wasn't through product. I don't think it was through vision. I think it was really through the groupthink snowball effect of having many other investors on. Someone will throw on an extra 25K just because you have 5 or 6 big names in a company.
Now, you were at FlowTab.
Do you think it's snowballed?
Absolutely, yeah.
You were at FlowTab when Clinkle was starting. I would imagine. Did you feel it at that moment? Did you feel like, wow, we're working? We actually have these merchant locations. We're actually out there with a product. We have a message. We have a narrative, and this company was basically running on apparently hot air. Well, how did that feel?
You basically. You run on what you have done and what you promise to do in the future. I don't think there's ever any sense of smoke and mirrors, but you be honest about what you've done, about the success you've seen so far and where you want to take it. And people essentially place a bet on your ability to do that. I think learning from one of the things we did well at FlowTab was we published everything that we did. We had a long TechCrunch. I think it was the most commented on TechCrunch article ever.
It was major.
And we got a huge response from people just saying, thank you for doing this. Thank you for starting this trend of being open with what you guys have done. And we did a lot, we did just about everything that you could do. And we also realized the benefit of just like learning from other companies. So one of the companies that reminds me of Clinkle is Color. Right, Color went out and raised more than Clinkle did. I think close to $40 million with no product, and the same almost exact thing happened. Right, where they fell apart internally. They had a lot of amazingly talented people that came from Google and Square and Apple at the time.
Everywhere,
and it just kind of fell apart. They never really had a true vision for the company. They were great at fundraising. I work with Peter, and he, the team is just awesome at what they do. But it takes a lot more than that. So.
Now, if you were in the belly of the beast, and you heard that this was going to be go to market for what I just explained, which, by the way, I try to find a simplistic way to explain it, and their website doesn't do any justice at all. What would you say? I mean, if you were somebody that was working alongside with Lucas, would you say, what are we doing? Would you bail, or would you try to, body block him from the exploding grenade?
No. I think Brian, the key to these kind of situations in just managing expectations, right? So, really, all that matters is your own team. I don't look at the public as something that you have to necessarily try to manage, right? Because people are going to have unpredictable responses. They're going to do what they're going to do, and you could deliver, personal messages. You could do whatever you could do there, but really it's all about your investors. It's about your employees and your customers. And I think the relationships you have with those 3 parties is what I would be thinking the most about, right? Especially between your employees and your customers, right? Like, do they even know each other? Do they build for each other? And I would start with a few successful use cases and really focus on morale. I think morale and culture are viewed oftentimes as kind of this soft, not really useful, kind of bullshitty thing, but it's so important. If your employees are talking to customers, they feel like they're delivering real value in the world, people aren't going to leave. They're going to attract their friend. They're going to bring in their friends.
But I'll tell you something. In the hype days of Clinkle, when no one knew what the product was, they had, I had calls from Visa, MasterCard, American Express, a few startups, a few financial institutions. Do you know what they're doing? I said, absolutely no idea,
I got to tell you, not only did I get those calls, I had large checks sent in my direction to try to break down the details. The paranoia was running so high.
It always does, Brian. People run on fear. People run on fear.
It was crazy in my view because
anyways, let's just switch gears.
Yeah, Brian.
PayPal and Bitcoin.
Faisal, I want to pull you in on this.
Dive in on that.
This has your name written all over it.
Yeah, this is a Faisal story.
No. I want to know your opinion.
Introduce the concept to us, Brian, Faisal.
This is great.
So PayPal has decided to partner up and with 3 companies. I believe it's BitPay, GoCoin, and Coinbase. And insofar as the information is out there, they will be able to accept Bitcoins and pay for digital games, and I think it's just digital in nature. It's not physical. No physical products and
only content, right? Essentially,
only content. No P2P. No physical products. No shipping and handling. No services. Just digital content.
Why you think, Faisal?
But at that very day they announced, and I was watching my Bloomberg terminal, I saw what Bitcoin price from 398.70 go up to 443, I think, something. Yeah. In a matter of maybe 2 hours, boom, just went up.
Wow.
Kraken had the highest day, highest volume for the day, and then someone else had some volume for the day. It just went crazy because, PayPal has accepted. That meant eBay will eventually accept it. And that means, the extrapolations are so good because, if you would extrapolate the result and you say, well, what does this mean? Well, that means tomorrow we'll be able to pay for, eBay using Bitcoins, and tomorrow we'll be able to do this and do that, and the wallet will have Bitcoins natively, and they've partnered up with the best 3 companies out there. And that hype is still living up. It's many people are feeling vindicated that, now that eBay, a company like eBay has decided to, tinkle and play with Bitcoins, there you go. What's this founder's name of eBay, the president? I forgot his name.
Donna.
John Donahoe.
Yeah. So he's always been advocating that, he likes Bitcoins, that somewhere down the line he will be implementing it. He owns a few just to see how it, the whole system works. But I feel this is some way, an endorsement. And, well, not an endorsement. It is an endorsement in the practical sense that they've taken it and put it into the wallet. Whether or not they will implement this as a payment rail somewhere down the line remains to be seen.
So why do you think it was limited, though? This is a big question. Everybody is asking me, and I got my own theories, but I'd really love to see your feedback on why did they constrain?
I think it's risk. I think everything, at the end of the day, I keep telling people the two powerful people in the company is the CFO and your chief risk officer. I think they are the 2 people who, if they say no, it's not worth it, meaning the CFO can say, it's not worth it for us. It's not economically viable for us. Or if the risk officer says that, this inherently represents a risk that is beyond our, limitations or the parameters we've defined. And if we do this, I can't be a part of it and I won't sign on it. I don't think so. No company worth its soil will actually go for it. They'll say, okay, fine, let's just stop. Let's just dump it. So I think the risk element came into play. I think there's a lot of unknowns, especially from the regulatory point of view. They go full-fledged. New York comes after them, California comes after them, some other state may come after them. They have their money transmitter licenses, and I think they want to protect them. And I also feel that somewhere down the line, this is a prediction on. So if I have to make a prediction, I think somewhere down the line, PayPal and eBay most likely will opt for a federally chartered nationwide bank.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. I think they will. I think they will because there are certain things you can do in the MSP space very well. There's certain things you can do within the banking space very well, and they'll probably keep both. Green Dot is a classical example. I don't know if you know that Green Dot and Walmart announced.
Yeah, this is a big thing.
And so, but yeah, many people don't know Green Dot has their own bank, and they have their MSP licenses, and they've kept them both.
Yeah,
So
they
what are the
really-
ramifications if PayPal were to do that?
Having their own bank, oh my God. Can you imagine how many wallet-to-wallet transactions had happened and all that money sitting in one bank account that they own? They'll be liquid. They have a lot of money. Their interchange fees that is going to the banks now, they could get their own acquiring license. That fees would come to them.
How would it play out on a world stage, though? I mean, they would obviously require banking in most provinces around the world, right, within the EU and your part of the world, et cetera, to make this really viable?
For PayPal, no one knows. I mean, after the exit of David Marcus, no one can really pinpoint with an exact nature, where the company is going. But I mean, the markets for them are North America, the EU, Australia, New Zealand. If they are present in these three key markets, as they put it, they've got it made. Because even within the EU, you have, I don't know, 30, 35 plus countries. You have Australia, New Zealand, very good in payments. You have the North American market, which is US and Canada. Just by themselves, I think they'll only be looking at banking licenses. The EU is just one banking license. ANZ and ANZ is two banking licenses. Canada is one banking license. US is one banking license. So not too many banks, But I don't know. But I feel that the Bitcoin thing, PayPal is not just going to be another wallet carrier to have Bitcoins, although that make a lot of sense. But then what's the end game? Why would PayPal want to have Bitcoins when they can already do, wallet-to-wallet transfers? Everyone is accepted. Is it just for paying at merchants that don't accept Bitcoins, that don't accept PayPal?
But doesn't it increase overall liquidity, right? Like even think about your life.
I think it's about the fact that they are realizing a transitional shift of how merchants are becoming more cognizant that there are alternates where they would have to pay, let's say 0.5% or 0.25% rather than 2.75 or 2.9% as fees, and they would maybe they've seen their numbers go down. Maybe they've seen their transactions go down. They say, we don't want to lose out on that market. So if tomorrow that market grows where you can have the ability to pay to any merchant via Bitcoin, it should be on the PayPal platform natively.
Yeah, it's also showing, I guess, acceptance of the fact that we've now sort of jumped the gap and Bitcoin is accepted mainstream. And I think also, wouldn't you agree that this also raises the visibility of Bitcoin to a level that heretofore has never it's never reached, right? I mean, we got average people looking at it. It's now a legitimate payment vehicle on PayPal.
Yeah, but Brian, here's the thing. What PayPal has actually done is they haven't integrated it in their own wallet per se. They're using the technology of the three providers, Coinbase, BitPay, and GoCoin. When it becomes native in their wallet, native as a PayPal account, sign up, that's when things would get really interesting. I think this is something where, if they see that the market or the regulatory, wave may go against them, they can just very easily close it down,
God, but I have to believe they're going in that direction.
I mean,
I think everyone's going in that direction.
Don't you think that at some point they're going to have to acquire one of these companies or build it themselves? I mean, it just seems like, why are they partnering? Shouldn't they be building this?
Hard to say. I mean, look at Circle. Circle's been doing great. So there are two types of companies. They're either a brokerage company, like Coinbase or Circle or BitPay, or they're the exchanges. The exchanges are driving the liquidity. That's where all the miners are going and throwing their coins, etc. And the merchants who are using the brokerage companies like Coinbase or BitPay, what have you, that's they are simply trading their Bitcoins back to fiat via the exchanges because the order books have been shared. So I don't know if they're going to go out and inherently, PayPal can, it's anyone's guess right now, but I guess they can go out, if they can go and acquire a company like BitPay. If they do that, my God, you can imagine the ramifications within the Bitcoin community and beyond.
That'd be
But,
huge.
Well, I think it's inevitable, and I could tell you that the brokerages, and being a miner myself, they're trying to cut deals with large miners so that they're getting the coin before they even go to the exchanges. So there's a dismediation that is subtly starting to take forth, and of course, exchanges like CXIO, one of the largest, they're kind of trying to do the same thing. I mean, they're covering all elements. They even have cloud mining. But, I think ultimately we would have to see these companies become deeper and deeper part of the ecosystem. And I don't think there's a way to go back, really. Unless
look at Circle. So when you open a Circle account, you get $10, courtesy Jeremy Allaire, right? So if they'd signed up 1 million people, $10 million, just right there. They're not doing this for, the love of God and country. They're doing this for, or the king for that matter. But I think they're doing this thing for, that they value themselves. They have a large enough user base that generates enough traction. And once they get the traction, then they can probably, be an acquisition target, acquiring target. But right now, I think if anyone can get acquired, I would look at companies like BitPay or Coinbase, because the usability of their product is way, way higher than, let's say, of Circle.
So how much more valuable does that make PayPal? Assuming they're sitting there with Coinbase or BitPay in their back right pocket, and it's integrated into their online and their mobile experience seamlessly, how does that now?
So if I were to look at it, I would say, well, why do I even need BitPay? Why do I even need Coinbase? I have the best wallet in the world. How difficult is it for me to implement a Bitcoin? It's not difficult. And what's the Bitcoin address? Well, it'll still remain your PayPal address,
Yeah, and that takes away the complexity, right? Because
absolutely, and because why fix anything that's broken? It works perfectly well. Everyone knows how to send money. So you could say, well, listen, I want to send you $10 worth. So the transaction would probably look like I'm sending you $10 worth of Bitcoins, and that worth would be calculated in real time, and how many Bitcoins or Satoshis it would be, they'd go across, and that's it. And for the geeks in you, you can then actually read it. Yeah, okay, they're sending me 0.00004 BTCs and so forth, and I can retain my BTCs if I want to. I understand the risks and the price for volatility and so forth. But I think if PayPal wants to do it, they'll keep their own wallet. They will incorporate in their own wallet. They will not incorporate or go buy out a company like if they buy BitPay, it's only because of the merchants, nothing more.
Interesting. See, I would think the perfect. Well, I wouldn't say perfect, but if I were in the acquisition department of eBay, PayPal, I would be going after Coinbase, because they have the mind share of, I think, a great deal of the lining up of what somebody would be within the PayPal community. So I'm kind of surprised that they didn't act quickly to do this. I would have thought when they started to really legitimately integrate Bitcoin within the system, that they would have made an acquisition to do it, so that they can actually put their stake tent down and say, okay, we're in this community. I think
But I think, Brian, there's a lot of old school in eBay, right?
Oh yeah, we know that by the people that have left, right? So
exactly. So I think that might be the problem. But anyways,
think it too creatively.
Just speaking of the company that David Marcus has gone into, Facebook. Facebook recently announced a buy button that is powered by Stripe. What do you think of that?
Well, gosh, I mean, let's just say Stripe is on fire. I mean, this is a company that's executing in perfection.
Brilliantly, yeah.
Brilliant. A lot of people call me an angry old man, and I am. But, the reality is, you can hear me talk glowingly of companies that are really getting it. And Patrick is just absolutely brilliant. His team is brilliant. And
they really are. Like I know a good number of their engineers, and it's almost like this magical culture they have of just attracting awesomely smart people.
Every time I see him talk, he just gets better and better at it.
Yes, and talk about a founder, and his brother also, John, is brilliant. And obviously it's hard. You have two brothers and stuff. stuff, but Patrick gives his brother a lot of the spotlight too. It's just he doesn't get covered as much. And both technically very proficient, philosophically very deep, and there is a lack of this startup arrogance and insular attitude, if a guy like myself has been around a lot of payment companies, I won't name names, but there's an insular, arrogant attitude within some payment companies that you almost get tired after having a meeting with these people. You kind of walk away and you hang out with these guys and you're energized. They look at the world, they're sparkling, and look how quickly they execute. Alibaba, boom. All these different payment options, Bitcoin integration. And let's look at what happened. Twitter very likely could have gone another direction with another payment startup company that was building an online buying platform, and they chose to go with Stripe. And now you have Facebook, and let's look at the big elephant in the room. Apple chose to reach out to them, not only them, but there are other companies, TSYS and Authorized.net, but they really reached out to them and said, we want you to be a part of Apple Pay with the in-app integration.
Stripe is the blue-eyed boy of the payment community, and everyone loves Stripe. I mean, although there are competing payment facilitators like WePay and Balance Payments, but Stripe is the first name that just comes to mind.
And we talk very nicely about Balance because they're a great company also, and they're executing well additionally. But Stripe has been able to really logarithmically jump every new step. It's going further and further. And, along the way, they're not really making enemies. There's none of this snot-nosed startup arrogance. And it's very easy to fall into that. And I think it's a great torch that Patrick is holding up high for other founders to say, listen, you can be a creative startup founder. You can be moving fast, and you don't have to carry this disruption narrative. You can keep your head down and just innovate and just let your work product prove.
So what does that button mean?
It means a lot. It means a lot because we're not even beginning to see the basis of what.
I mean, I understand there will be tokenization, there'll be vaulting. The credit card numbers would not be going through this thing because it's a one-time token. It'll be easier because Stripe already handles. They have got their own vault, and
they
PCI
worked on that,
et cetera, et cetera.
They worked on that tirelessly, and we can't underplay having the vision to do this a long time ago, not just today, but a long time ago, built the infrastructure to do this. And so when it came time for these companies, very large companies, Twitter and Facebook, Apple, and not Apple is using the tokenization. There's actually some kind of conflict there, but we'll see that resolve, and I can cover that later. But, within the Twitter community, it's, to me, a little light duty because Twitter just does not have enough substance to become transactional to the way that Facebook can. Facebook, the involvement, and let's talk about Pinterest. I don't want to talk out of class, but find, in the back of your mind that Pinterest is going down the same road very aggressively.
Click to buy.
What's that?
Click to buy.
Yeah, of course, because these social signals that you're getting from your greater group of friends and their ability to surface things that you find interesting. And you could just look at it and like it, and you can look at it and buy it. It's a one-step move. And once you're in that Stripe ecosystem, you're now able to forever just do essentially an Amazon one-click. So what Stripe has essentially done is they've broken the Amazon one-click instant buy model to a certain extent. It's not really fully one click, but it's darn near close. So that we can now have these impulse buys. Now, I'm not saying we're going to be buying. Well,
not just impulse buys. You have to understand. Pages didn't have that ability. You had to actually use a third party like Shopify or something, and then you had to install the app, etc. There was a lot of crap going on.
And even on the user side, is a lot of work.
Probably is.
So now what you can do, and again, if you really distill it down to your typical middle America or, average, mom and dad type of use case, they'll see something come along, my wife sees a lot of things on Pinterest and Facebook, and she goes, I want to buy that. Her ability to research that has gotten really good, but it's maybe half an hour. Where'd you see that picture? Let me do a Google search, blah, blah, blah. If you can now incentivize people who are promoting your product within a Facebook wall announcement or a posting, and completely link that on there. this is the other aspect that I would, if I was involved deeply, is you would want to be able to have the publisher participate in some way in promoting that aspect. I don't attribute to multi-level marketing or anything like that, but there should be a return on investment for somebody, right? There should be, if I've really done a good job, it's like YouTube videos, right? If you've really gotten a lot of YouTube hits, you're going to be sharing in the proceeds. But that's another story. But at least today, we're now shortening the step of how quickly one needs to get to the buying position. And this is what retail has always been about.
It's really not. And the other thing that gives me confidence that it's gonna go so well for them, Facebook, is they've done this already. They've done it with Facebook Connect, right? Facebook essentially is your validated identity online. And with one click of a button, 90% of sites now they do, right? It's become so successful. It'll be the same thing with payments.
Any company I look at, and they have a Facebook page and they have a Twitter ID. Almost every company, right? And now suddenly, Facebook pages, they have all these things, and you do the likes, etc. But suddenly, if payments are enabled in the way that we are thinking, you have one of the largest payment, marketplaces in the world.
And it's early days. It's very, very early days, and I'm certain that David Marcus.
Serious threat to eBay.
It's serious threat to eBay, Amazon, but I believe that it's not such. It's more of a hypothetical, existential threat, because I think what we're really going to see is an expansion of the marketplace. I think if anything is a threat of retail sales, because as these streams start coming across that have little buy buttons next to it, I think it's going to make it extremely easy for people to buy things they didn't think they wanted. Let's face it, after we put in a roof over
it's in your feed, it's in your feed. I see it in my feed, and it's in my ecosystem. It's in my comfort zone.
But it's curated. But let's look at it. This is highly curated, and a lot of the talking heads that were and tech writers that were blogging about this miss this point that what is really brilliant about Facebook, and this is not so true with Twitter, is the high level of curation that's involved. And Pinterest is the ultimate of curation, because that's essentially a platform of curation. And by having those signals of highly curated data coming across, and you have people of great like minds, and they're saying, well, I love those shoes, or that's a great hat. Boom.
Well,
and it's across the country, across the world.
The other thing I think is just astounding is it's going to be outside of Facebook primarily, right? Like when I'm in Facebook browsing around, sure, there might be some things that pop up, but it's really when I'm out on the hundreds of other applications that I use, that I'm logged in, that now when I pop up Facebook Connect and it says, one of the 7 permissions I give them is the ability to run my credit card, right? So now every site on the internet can just use a Connect with Facebook button and just ask for payment information.
I love that you brought that up, because that's another extension of this power. It's but and that's not really going to surface until much later in this whole trajectory that they're on. I think, of course, it's always going to be primarily in a Facebook platform, and then we start seeing as we go around the internet that the buying opportunity. It's what Amazon has been trying to do. It's what PayPal has been trying to do for a while. That sort of OAuth capability of getting into a buying position. And this is kind of where I think the rubber hits the road. And that's why, if you really look at what PayPal's been doing recently with their marketing, is they've really been promoting this one-click experience. And a lot of it is based upon, I guess, a fear that they knew this was coming with Facebook, and now it's
so in the end, does this explode the Bitcoin valuation? Because if Stripe integrates Bitcoin, Facebook integrates Stripe, everyone's transacting, and it's absolutely free to use Bitcoin.
I'll tell you one thing that's been bothering me, and I'll say, pardon me, because I do not have anything to back it up, but I feel there's a lot of awareness of Bitcoin, but not enough transactions on Bitcoin.
Exactly. And this could be the catalyst for it, right? This could be the thing.
The thing about Bitcoin is right now it's an investment vehicle primarily. I'd say to the 99th percentile. Yeah. And that's true with any gold really was not a vehicle of of any other use but investment, even in the very earliest cultures. They valued it because it was unable to tarnish, and it was it transcended ages, and it became an existential holding of wealth. And it only became a transaction mechanism for a very brief point in history, where we would probably say about 2,000 years of human history. And it's no longer a transaction mechanism today, right? I mean, you don't see people trading gold. In the 1800s, you did, right? But as we went into the 1900s and 2000s, nobody's trading gold. Now, is that possible what Bitcoin might do? In some ways, yes. I think long term, because it has constrained, number of Bitcoins, ultimately, it is going to be hard to even deal with fractionalization. So I think there'll be, alternative currencies that may be based off Bitcoin at some future day, and of course, ultimately alternate currencies.
But one thing I'd like to pick your brain is because we've seen PayPal in the news. The big four are Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple.
Sure.
Apple's been in the news. Facebook has been in the news. Amazon has been in the news. Google's been very quiet.
Google is is still in wound licking mode, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do.
Well said, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, they were really ahead of their time, but they failed to be good negotiators, right? Because Google Wallet was tied to the secured element, which was controlled by
just that word,
carriers.
Google Wallet. If I ask people, do you want to go get a Google Wallet?
It's a punchline at this point, and so is Google. So is Google Glass to some extent, and I love Google, and I love the engineering culture there. But the thing that makes Apple thrive, and why everybody gets so mad at Apple, and they say Google did this before, and it's yes, and there were other people that invented cars before, and other people that even flew before. We remember the people who popularized it, and they solved the problem to make it accessible to all. Henry Ford made the car accessible to everybody, and it wasn't until about 2 years of production he looked down and he said, nobody's driving my cars to work.
So Google's the Henry Ford of payments, huh?
No. Google is actually more the Mercedes-Benz because, Daimler and Benz, they got together and they were looking at this solving of the car, automobile, and they were using steam engines, electric, and they kind of were experimenting. Henry Ford is more like the Apple. They looked at all these technologies and they popularized it. What Apple did is what they always do, is they reached out to the open standard. And a lot of people don't get this. They say, well, Apple Pay is closed. No, it isn't. What Apple did is they opened up everybody to participate in the NFC mechanism. So it or an Android device that's communicating to the merchant using NFC. What Apple did, and I wrote this a little bit, and I can now talk about this more publicly. One of my really big frustrations with startups and their closed wallet dreams and ambitions was it was really a dark Orwellian world that they were trying to create. Let's just say that Square Wallet took the world by storm and everybody wanted the Square Wallet and every merchant. Do you want to know what it would have been? One company in control of the consumer and the merchant. The merchant account was controlled by Square. The consumer side was controlled by Square, and there's nobody else in the ecosystem but them. Well, first off, history, logic, and gravity tells you that will never happen, period, ever. But also, if it did even get close to that happening, it wouldn't be a world that you and I would love to live in. Because first off, Square has proven itself not to be open with their APIs like Stripe. Stripe is the antithetical response to Square. All Stripe really is open APIs. Square is, my way, the highway. So what Apple did is they looked at this and they said, we need a common element that isn't just about Apple Pay. It's about the merchant. It's about the ecosystem. And NFC was that. And so now Google can respond, and so can ISIS or I hate saying the name, Soft Card. Oh, I said it. These are NFC responses. They're not optimized. They need to be cleaned up, but they can still be used at the same merchants. So when people start belly aching, who did it first? Google, it really should be today, and they should have been doing this 2 years ago because, the patents were clear. Apple was going to open up NFC and they should be ready to respond. if the community on the Android side got together and they started looking at all this and they said, well, we now know that of the majority of merchants, today as it stands, it's more than 200,000. It's probably approaching 300,000. I've been doing research. I have 2 studies going right now. The increase of payment card terminals with NFC just over the days from the announcement of Apple Pay have increased to the point of almost 2,000% increase in distribution. In fact, in some supplies are sold out. So there is a tremendous amount of demand from the merchants to get these devices in there.
Huge.
And you might ask why? Why? Because people are going to want to use this. I tell you, one of my clients is they position their kiosks to be right near Apple's Apple stores in malls, and they have over, I think, 2,000 locations. And they want to be the first Apple Pay transaction people use the moment they leave the Apple store. And they have branding and signage that are going to have you come over there. They're a jewelry company. And,
So I think another interesting point there, Brian, is that so you imagine Apple Pay approaching Visa, MasterCard, Discover, or Amex and saying, we're going to build you in our phones, huge market share. We're going to distribute it. It's going to be better for people, better for merchants, win-win all around. Great. Let's do it. Let's partner. You release the Apple Wallet. You can go in with Apple Pay. You put your finger up to the fingerprint scanner and everything is seamless. You don't even have to pass credit card transactions. It's through the token.
More
Beautiful.
secure.
More secure
than anything
more
ever
secure
done.
To the point that if you were to steal my phone, you couldn't make a transaction. And I think that's an obvious and subtle point, but has huge ramifications right now. So if you, even this past week, I use my credit card for business and personal, and I'll buy flights and I'll, have merchants across the country online, and they don't know if it's in person. So the credit card blocks a lot of things for me, and it's very annoying. Yeah. And I get quite frustrated with it. And I realize it's for the benefit of them, right? It's no benefit to me because I'm never held reliable for fraudulent activities. But why do they need to do that? The huge costs in those companies, those brands, are mitigating risk to fraud. Now, all of a sudden, Apple comes around and says, okay, we're going to crush risk to the point where it's not even a bump on your revenue, or it's not even a bump on your expenses.
Well, 50%, more than 50% of the worldwide fraud in credit card happens in the US alone.
No, how does that affect things where now all of a sudden these major brands, which are known for just all they are is mitigating risk and preventing fraud, now they're almost useless, right? Why do I need a brand anymore? All I need now is someone to issue credit. Right, I don't need like that 3% fee we all pay, and increased prices at merchants. Those merchants now don't have to pay that. That should drop to zero.
I used to make the same mistake, but there's a number of things that we always have to constantly remind ourselves. First off, when you are extending credit, because there's credit cards and debit cards. Debit cards are a completely different thing. The rates on debit cards, that being you have money in an account and you're just simply drawing that money in real time away, that is going to fall to the floor because there's less risk and liability in there. But as soon as you now want to pay for something today that you can't afford until next 3 months, 10 months, unfortunately 5 years from now, you're still paying for it. That's called credit. And there's a completely different branding and infrastructure that's required for that to happen. And it is a tremendously complex and risky thing. When we had Ohad on,
risk costs you regardless. I mean, you do transactions on the network or not, risk will cost you. I mean, it's there. It's a percentage. It's a fee. It'll always be there. Credit is a further risk. I mean, seriously. And so I don't think so they're going to take it down like the world is expecting to zero.
Can't go to zero.
But I think they'll say, okay, fine, from 2.7, let's take it down to 2.5,
they already
2.2,
did it, right?
Yeah,
Apple cut a deal. Apple cut a deal on the interchange because they did a simple chart. And they said, well, first off, let's back up for 1 sec. There are payment experts that are running around on TV saying that fraud is just a rounding error in the payment card industry. And this is a ridiculous pronouncement. I've worked within this industry for decades, and nobody sees fraud as a rounding error. So if you hear somebody saying that, chuckle, and especially note who's saying it. And you got to scratch your head and say, why are they saying this? So fraud is a huge problem for everybody, merchants, merchant processors, acquiring banks, card issuers especially.
And once that gets crushed, right, once fraud is gone, doesn't that give Apple the power seat to launch the Apple Card?
Of course. The fear is you need, it's the same problem that record labels, movie companies, TV companies have with Apple. You rise to the occasion now, especially the payment card industry. They could have cold shouldered Apple. There was only two companies that could have pulled something like this off. It was Square or it was Apple. At one time, Square was at the peak of everybody's interest, and Jack could have really have negotiated some of these things. Unfortunately, he took the wrong advice. Apple went and did it. And so what happened is you have people that are standing around saying, I want to get behind Apple. But in the back of their mind, they're saying, gosh, we are dancing with the serpent and they could take a bite out of us at any time. And
I bet it's going to happen.
Well, it could be related to Bitcoin. Apple is not opposed to Bitcoin. So we could kind of cap this off looking at the fact that Apple is really just an identification system. Apple Pay is more of an identification system, a credentialing system that's biometrically tied to you. And it is relatively the most secure system that one could have on a mobile device. I mean, between the secure element and the secure enclave, you're going to have even the most advanced technologists have decades to try to find ways to get in there. You literally have to get into the hardware. There's no software way to extract this data. So Apple could, in fact, wind up using digital currencies. What I can say this, and I can say it with absolutely no question, Apple will allow other forms of transactions and person-to-person payments at some point. And how that transgresses in the future is really based upon how the banks deal with Apple, because the banks could be shut out of that or they can be central to it. And thus far, Apple has been brilliant in negotiating. And that's getting back to closing off the Google argument here. Google didn't know how to communicate effectively with everybody in the ecosystem because realistically, Google's ultimate game plan wasn't really to be part of the payments ecosystem, but this to derive the information from the transaction and to use as a targeting mechanism. Right. And what did Apple do? Apple went out and they keep repeating this. We don't know what you paid for. We don't know who you paid it and where you paid for it. All of this stuff is private data. We will never have access to it unless you grant us case by case access to it. Google, their entire premise is on that. And
I think it's out of necessity, right? One's a hardware company, one's making software. So
yeah, and so Apple has delivered part of that nuclear threat that Steve talked about. They effectively are shutting down this idea about sharing data. And this is, by the way, a Clinkle story too. The reason why we have that card out there is ostensibly this payment card that Clinkle is giving. Ostensibly, Clinkle has access to every single one of those transactions as a user. You can look at that in Clinkle's corporate computers and say, okay, Joe went and had a Starbucks here at 10 a.m. He went over to, later on and had lunch over at the Melt and on and on and on, and he spent this much. And you could start selling that data and piecemealing it. Now, it takes a whole lot of that data to be valuable, but that's part of their privacy.
It's a long-term play.
Yeah, it's a long-term play, and that's what some of these investors, unfortunately, were sold into. That's why they're a little ticked off at this point about the investment, because now this is in the public narrative. You and I are going to be talking about exactly how much of our transactional data do we want to share.
Anytime your company gets a headline of laughing stock, no one's happy.
That was a terrible morale.
Well, gentlemen, we're out of time.
Guys, this has been a beautiful show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take care. Have a good one. We'll speak next week.
Alrighty. See ya.